going to talk about another Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale today. Up on the bed. Come on, Brenda. Up. 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 I have to talk about the book. I have to talk about a movie that's based on the book. No, it's based on the fairy tale specifically, not this specific book. Up. Okay, we're going to talk about Hans Christian Andersen today in regards to Thumbelina, when we talk about the movie Thumbelina that came out in 1994. This book is just one of the various retellings that has been done over the years. I very much like it. I think it's a very nice book. It's a very prettily, very beautifully drawn book. Beautifully illustrated and everything. That's just a whole page of spiders. That's just a no. That's just a no. No giant thing of spiders. We don't do giant thing of spiders. Giant things of spiders are bad. Triple fold out page for the wedding. I love that. That's so pretty. So, as I said, this is going to be about the 1994 movie Thumbelina, animated movie, done by Don Bluth and Gary Goldman. And it is, of course, based on said story by Hans Christian Andersen, very similar to how The Little Mermaid, which will get mentioned later in this video, is also a Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, as is The Snow Queen that Frozen is based off of. There's a lot of others. I know Disney did a short based around The Little Match Girl, which is also another Hans Christian Andersen story. So they've popped up at various points in time. And the music in this movie was actually composed by Barry Manilow. So that's fun. If for younger viewers, if you don't know who Barry Manilow is, go look up the Copacabana. Go look up the song at the Copacabana, and that'll give you an idea of who Barry Manilow is. Very dancey song, very sad lyrics. Okay, so the movie starts in Paris, once upon a time in Paris, and we are introduced to this sparrow whose name is Jacquemot, and we see him flying around, and we see him fly into Notre Dame. To be fair, this movie was made before Disney did Hunchback of Notre Dame, so I don't know. Flies into Notre Dame, and we see that he has all of this collection of books, and lots of them are, as he says, he loves stories about people with big or impossible problems, specifically like impossible romances. Like we see Samson and Delilah, Romeo and Juliet, stuff about, Venus, the goddess of love, lots of different stuff like that. And he's like, but the most impossible of all is the story of Thumbelina. And then we get very similar to the Disney storybook openings that they would do for some of the classics, and as they kind of started doing a little bit again later, opens up on this little tiny book, and we start to get the story of Thumbelina. So the way the story starts is there is this widow who has longed for a child for so long, but was never able to have a child. So she goes and visits a good witch. And this very friendly witch gives her a barley seed and tells her to water it and take care of it, and it will grow. And lo and behold, it does. It grows, and it grows into a beautiful flower that she then kisses. And then out of the flower emerges this, little girl, no bigger than her thumb. And this is, of course, Thumbelina. And, of course, the old woman, names her Thumbelina and raises her as her own. Fairy tale stuff. Oh, I have a child that was born out of a plant. I'm going to raise it. Generally, in a lot of the stories for at least the original interpretation for Thumbelina, I believe, she is just that age when she's born. It's not like she's a baby and then she has, the mom has to raise her. The widow has to raise her, but still. And then we kind of get we get kind of the opening number of the movie more formal opening number, where we have all of the farm animals on the widow's farm, on the mother's farm, singing the song Thumbelina, where we're just like learning about Thumbelina, seeing her, different trials and tribulations that she kind of has to go through because she's so small. She falls off stuff, she falls into stuff, and also like from her perspective of like, am I the only one my size and stuff like that, because she's like, everything in the world is so big. There's like, a plum so big, and a fig is so big, and a twig so big, but they call it a twig, and it goes through like all this other stuff that's like very much like, Thumbelina is very small in this very, very big world. And even like the chicks on the farm are bigger than she is. And, so we go through all of that, and we get to meet, see a bunch of the farm animals, and the main farm animal that we end up interacting with is Hero, who is the dog on the farm. And then, one night we have it that Thumbelina's mother is reading her, a bunch of, a book of fairy tales, as one does, reads her a book of fairy tales and stories of heroes and everything. And Thumbelina's like, Mother, aren't there any stories about, little people? And her mother shows her part of a story that is about a fairy prince and princess getting married and everything. And she's like, they're my size. But what are the things on their backs? Those are wings. These are fairies, Thumbelina. And she's like, do you think I'll ever find someone who's, my size or like me? And the, and the mother, of course, is very hopeful that she will, because like the mother, as much as she has longed for a child, she does not want Thumbelina to feel lonely in the world. She's protective of Thumbelina and the fact that like your daughter is small and you want to keep her safe, but she's, she doesn't want to, prevent Thumbelina from learning about the world necessarily. Also, we don't know exactly how long it's been since Thumbelina was born, I guess would be a good way of putting it. I was going to say hatched, and I'm like, no. Bloomed. That has other implications. But so we go with that, and then, the mother goes to bed, and she leaves up the book for Thumbelina to look at, and then we have Thumbelina's song, which is the equivalent of the I Want song. That is soon, is what it's called, and it's her, hoping very soon that someone will show up, that not like she doesn't want to be with her mother, but she doesn't want to be the only one her size. She wants to know that she is not alone in that regard. And she's kind of, flirting with like the prince in the book and everything and stuff like that, and like the pictures in the book, which is like exactly like a teenage girl does with like the posters on her wall or something like that, where she has like her crush on the wall that's like either an actor she really loves or a character she really loves or a musician or something like that, where they flirts with insert character, or teenage boys do this too, where they do that. And that's kind of like what they're parroting here, which I love how they came up with that equivalent of like, it's in a storybook, because that's the right size for her to be able to look at. And so we get that. And then on that same night, what is happening is we cut outside, and we see that the leaves are starting to turn golden, and then it's like fall is arriving, and we are introduced to the fairy court and the fairy king and queen. And this scene is just very, to a degree, in my opinion, reminiscent of Fantasia during the Nutcracker sequence, where they have like all the fairies going through and like changing the weather and stuff like that. So we have like that that kind of reference there. But I know it's not, it's not necessarily a full-on reference, but it's kind of a reference to it in all honesty. And what ends up happening is, we're introduced to the fairy king and queen, and they're talking about their son Cornelius, who's like not there, even though it's, the changing of the seasons, and he should be there helping them. But he's probably off riding around on his, bumblebee. And then we are introduced to, lo and behold, Cornelius on his bumblebee. And he ends up hearing Thumbelina singing, and makes his way to, the farmhouse, where he sees her kind of dancing in front of the window and everything. And he like sneaks in and sneaks around and sneaks his way behind the book before, interrupting her while she's talking with, the pages in the book and everything, the pictures in the book, frightens her, which is fair. She hides in a teapot, which I just love. She's like, oh, stranger danger, hide in a teapot. Which is just adorable. And he kind of like follows her, and then like we have the moment where she's like realizing that you were my size. I thought I was the only one and everything. So we get like this nice sequence where like, they're kind of getting introduced to each other, but Hero wakes up and starts kind of barking and growling at Cornelius. So Thumbelina and Cornelius kind of like appease Hero by like doing introductions type of a thing. Which is adorable. He does not tell her that he's the fairy prince. He doesn't tell her that right away. But like, they start talking and kind of flirting, and it's, very innocent type of flirting. And she's like, so there is so there are fairies. Is there a fairy court? Yes. And if there's a fairy court, there must be a fairy prince. And he's like, yes. And it's like he's kind of dodging the topic, but it's not like in a mean way or anything like that. Like, I think if she point blank asked him, he might tell her. But I mean, generally speaking, it's like if you run into someone from like another culture, you're not going to automatically assume, oh, are you the prince of this culture? It's like, not that that doesn't happen occasionally if you look at all of the Hallmark and Lifetime movies that revolve around this. But it's not it's not like it's always going to happen, although in fairy tales, that is generally what happens. And what ends up happening is, of course, he takes her outside to see Bumble, or Buzz, who's his Bumble, and it's the equivalency of like kicking the girl outside to look at your motorcycle or your cool car. So I love that equivalent there. And then they end up getting on the Bumblebee, and they end up flying around and falling in love. And of course, they're singing the song "Let Me Be Your Wings," which I love this song. This song is so pretty and so romantic as they're just flying around, riding on a swan, going around, dancing on a pumpkin. Cinderella reference, anybody? The swan is, I think, also a reference to The Ugly Duckling, which is, I think, another Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale. I think that's correct off the top of my head. He wrote a good chunk of fairy tales, which is pretty awesome. And, so it goes through, this very nice romantic sequence, and as they're out, they end up landing on this like little showboat type thing where these toads live, and we see Mrs. Toad and her son Grandel, who they're both just enchanted by Thumbelina. She's beautiful, she can sing, and Grandel is just very much like, ooh, I want her, therefore I must have her type of a thing, is the way that he kind of acts. He's kind of one of the villains in the movie, it's the antagonist type of a thing. We'll get to that later. And, eventually, Cornelius takes Thumbelina home, and throughout the course of their nice fun flying around and everything, Thumbelina ended up getting this necklace that was made by a bunch of, little, jitterbug children, that's like made of forget-me-nots, and she gives it to Cornelius, please, don't forget me. And he's like, oh, I'll never forget you. And then he gives her his ring, to remember him by. And I really like this. It's a very sweet moment. It's like the trading stuff kind of makes them semi-engaged, I guess, considering this is like, like, I don't know, 17th, 18th century France or whatever. I don't know. It could be Denmark. I don't know. We don't get a specific name for like where this specific part of the story is taking place. Also, there's stuff that is like, anachronistic, which is just funny in general. Mostly anachronistic with stuff with the toads, to a degree. And, so we see that, and then we start hearing this voice shouting in the background, and it's the fairy queen, and Cornelius and Thumbelina are kind of trying to hide, and this is where it gets revealed that he's the fairy prince, and then he asks her if she would meet his parents, and she's like, oh, your parents? Yes, I would love to, but will they like me? And he's like, oh yes, they'll love you. So it's not that he was hiding the fact that he's a fairy prince, it's just that he's so used to the fact for like so many like the other fairies, like the female fairies and stuff like that, the girl fairies, they're very much like, oh, Cornelius is the fairy prince, if I marry him I'll be the fairy queen type of a thing. He didn't want that necessarily with, Thumbelina, which is fair. I don't blame people when they're like that, when they're just like, they're like a celebrity of some kind, a sports celebrity, a singer, a musician, a actor or whatever. And, you know, if they run into someone who happens to not know who they are for whatever various reasons, it's like, oh, they're just not into that type of culture, so they don't know who you are. There could be a good chunk of different, like, sports stars, football players, basketball players, stuff like that could walk right by me and, like, come up and introduce themselves to me, and I probably wouldn't know who they are or recognize them anyway. Or some musicians that I'd be like, okay, and then I just walk off. And I'm just like, you're not someone that's on my radar. Good for you. I'm glad you're successful. But like, so Cornelius kind of wanted a little bit of that anonymity, not an anonymity when he was, you know, getting to know, you know, Thumbelina and everything. So it's not like he doesn't have that pressure of being the prince trying to use that to impress her. He just wants to get to know her as himself. Perfectly valid. And he's like and he's like, will you meet my parents tomorrow? And she's like, yes. You have to meet my mother. And he's like, okay, I'll be back in the morning. And to his credit, he has full intention of showing back up in the morning. Nothing that happens in that regard is his fault. He is very intended to show back up in the morning. Him and his bumblebee leave. And Thumbelina is just so happy about this, and she goes to bed. And then that night, Mrs. Toad sneaks her way into the house and traps Thumbelina inside of her walnut shell bed, which is just adorable. This bed is adorable. Traps her in that, steals her away. Hero tries to stop her. Doesn't manage to stop her, but, you know, she gets away with Thumbelina and takes her back to their little houseboat, showboat thing that they have. And, you know, Thumbelina's mother, of course, in the morning is just devastated that Thumbelina is gone. She is just like, you know, I don't know where my baby girl is. Where is she? She's so devastated, and Hero is blaming himself for what happened. Because, like, he tried to protect her, but he couldn't protect her. And then we have that Cornelius shows up, and he shows up with, like, his arms laden with, like, gifts and everything else like that. So that way, you know, he can, you know, try to impress Thumbelina a little bit more. He's, you know, got flowers for her. He's got other stuff. We don't ever see what's in the other gifts. Probably something for, like, Thumbelina's mother and everything. Very prepared to be like, yes, I'm going to this. And he's still wearing the forget-me-not necklace, which is just adorable. And, you know, and he shows back up, and he's, like, so ready to see her, so happy. And then he, like, sees that, like, Thumbelina's not there. And then he, like, talks with Hero, and Hero explains that she was stolen by a toad. And Cornelius is like, I'm going to go find her. You stay here and protect her mother. I'm going to go find Thumbelina and everything. So he heads off very valiantly. I would kind of like to hope that even if, like, him and Thumbelina hadn't hit it off in a romantic aspect, but more friends, that he would still be like, oh my god, my friend is missing, I'm going to go try to find her. I would still hope that would be the case, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, I don't know. But, like, you know, he heads off to try to go find her, and one of the first things he does is he goes and talks to his parents, the king and queen, is trying to implore them to hold off the frost from coming, because freezing will make it, A, harder on Thumbelina while she's out, trying to find her way home. B, makes it harder to find her because it's then, like, so much colder out that it's harder for, you know, his bumblebee to fly and for other search parties to try to find her and everything. So, like, he's, you know, imploring his parents to help, and they try to do their best to try to hold back the frost as best they can. We cut to the houseboat where Thumbelina is with the toads, and she's waking up, and then she ends up getting, you know, meets Mrs. Toad, and then she introduces her 3 sons, including Grandel. And then she's like, oh, you know, don't, you know, you can come with us and perform with us and everything else like that. It'll be wonderful. And she's like, no, I want to go home. I want to go find my mother again. And then I'm going to go and, you know, wait for Cornelius. I think I'm going to marry him. And then Mother Toad, who is very good at this, is like, no, don't get married. And she, like, lists off all of, like, the bad things about having to, like, be married and be a domestic and everything else like that. I'm like, you are the mother of 3 sons. Who frickin' raised those boys? If not you. And she's, like, going through all of this stuff, and then she's just like, no, come on the road with us. And we're getting, like, this song about, like, you know, them traveling to all of these exotic lands and everything else like that. And, like, trying to convince Thumbelina to come with them and everything. And to a degree, it's a fun song. Other swamp animals show up and start, watching and clapping along and, applauding them and everything as they're all dancing about and everything. They are very good, entertainers. I'll give them that much. But, it basically, the song ends with, like, Thumbelina going, like, no, I still want to go home. Or, like, maybe I will go with you. And, her Mrs. Toad is like, good, and you'll marry my son Grandel. And she's like, what? No, I'm going to marry Cornelius. And they're like, no, 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 no. And then they just like head off to go and find a priest, I guess, and they just leave her sitting on a lily pad in the middle of the lake, or in the middle of the stream. Everybody else leaves. She's just sitting there on the lily pad like, how do I get out of this situation? Then she is introduced to Jacquemot. Shows up, same bird from the beginning of the movie, shows up, the swallow, and he's along with a group of helpful jitterbugs and some other animals like some fish in the river and stuff like that. They are able to get Thumbelina safely to shore amongst the well, for them they would be bad rapids to have to deal with because, like, she's tiny. For humans it wouldn't be a problem, but because Thumbelina is so tiny, bad rapids to deal with. They get her to shore, and they're like, okay, well, what are you gonna do now? And she's like, well, I really want to go home. And she's much more focused on trying to get home to her mother than she is on necessarily finding Cornelius at the moment. Mostly because, like, she just wants to get home. And we get the song with Jacquemot singing along with all the insects and stuff of, follow your heart, blah, 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 blah. It's a cute song again. With all the animals dancing and everything, trying to help get, Thumbelina on her way home. And she starts heading off. And Jacquemot is going to try to find the Veil of the Fairies, is I think his intention, is to go to try to find the Veil of the Fairies so that way he can try to find Cornelius to bring him to where Thumbelina is. In all freaking honesty, I don't understand why Jacquemot doesn't just, like, because later on we see that he can clearly fly with Thumbelina on his back. I don't understand why he doesn't just, like, get her on his back, fly up, she can look around, and then point, like, oh, my farm, my home is in that direction, and then just, like, fly her there. That would be the reasonable answer here, but that's not what happens. Thumbelina ends up, going off on her own. And in the process, she ends up running into a Berkeley beetle, is what his name is. Runs into him, which is just funny. It's a reference to, like, Busby Berkeley, and everything. Who's this famous not composer, famous choreographer, dancer type thing. Busby Berkeley musicals, if you've heard of those. So this is who the bug is referencing. The beetle is referencing, and so he runs into Thumbelina, and he thinks she's very pretty and thinks she can sing very beautifully and everything. So he takes her to the Beetle Ball, which is this big nightclub type thing. And we get to that night, and all of Thumbelina is kind of dressed up, looking like kind of like a butterfly or like a night moth or something like that, where she looks very pretty in the dress. I will admit the dress is pretty, bit over the top, but still pretty. And we get this big performance. It is very much based off of, like, Busby Berkeley musicals, like big dance numbers and everything else like that, tap dancing and everything else like that, with like Berkeley in the middle, the Beetle in the middle, and like all of his other dancers, and then dancing around Thumbelina and everything. And it's called Your Beautiful Baby, and it's it's this big tap dance number, which is really pretty. I do enjoy the number. It's funny. Up until a point where he spins Thumbelina around, her costume falls apart, and then all of the bugs start calling her ugly, including Berkeley. They all start calling her ugly and everything, saying that she's, where are her feelers, where's her shell, where's her, other stuff, because, like, to the bugs, she's not pretty, because she doesn't have the stuff that they consider a beautiful thing to have. And so Thumbelina is very devastated by this. And, The beetle rejects her at this point in time. Grendel has found out that she is missing, that she ran away and everything, so he's not happy about that, so he goes off to try to find her. And then we have it that, Giacomo finds Thumbelina, where she is just, she's so sad because, like, she was told by the beetle and by all the other insects that she was ugly, and of course Giacomo is trying to help her realize that, no, you're not ugly, your mother doesn't think you're ugly, Cornelius doesn't think you're ugly, I don't think you're ugly, the important people do not think you're ugly. It's like, are you in love with the beetle? And she's like, no. She's like, then it doesn't matter if he thinks you're ugly. The people who do care about you don't think that you're ugly, they think that you're beautiful. And so he's cheering her up, and then, like, he makes a promise that he'll go and find Cornelius and everything in the morning. We kind of cut ahead a little bit, and we have it that Grendel has found the beetle, has found Berkeley, and he is basically forcing the beetle to find Cornelius, so that way they can lure Thumbelina to Grendel with Cornelius as bait. To be fair, not a bad idea. And he coerces the beetle into doing this. Basically, he, like, steals the beetle's wings. To be fair, I don't know if the beetle's wings are reattachable. The beetle acts like they are, so I'm assuming possibly. I don't know enough about, like, bug genetics to figure that one out. I don't care enough to figure it out either. And what ends up happening is, of course, we're kind of moving forward in the seasons, and Giacomo is out trying to do his best to try to find the Veil of the Fairies, and it is now very much into fall, and unfortunately he ends up getting hurt. He gets a thorn stuck in his wing, and then it shifts into winter, therefore it is even harder because now there's, bad weather going on. During this time frame, Cornelius also has ended up making his way to interacting with the jitterbugs, and, like, they kind of tell him some of the information that they know about where Thumbelina is. Again, I don't know why they can't just, like, Giacomo can't just pick Thumbelina up, fly her up, and fly her home, and then go and find Cornelius and tell all the bugs, if you see Prince Cornelius, tell him that Thumbelina is safe and that I took her home, type of a thing. That would be great. That would just make this so much less frustrating here, but that's not what happens. Cornelius is still very much worried about Thumbelina and everything, and he's still wearing the necklace, which I like that indication. Thumbelina still has the ring at this point in time as well. That'll come up later. And what ends up happening is, of course, Cornelius flies off, and he unfortunately ends up falling and landing in a lake where it ends up freezing, and he's stuck in the lake. He's stuck in the ice. Said now Ice Prince is found by Berkeley, by the beetle and his cohorts, his other beetles, and they, cut Cornelius out of the ice mostly, and they take him to where the toad is, and they're like, okay, here's Cornelius. During this time, Giacomo is now hurt from his thorn in his wing, plus winter showing up is not helpful. And Thumbelina has kind of tried to hide out in an old shoe, just some random old shoe, where she is actually then taken in by Mrs. Field Mouse, but we'll get back to that in a second. We do have a moment where we cut back to the farm where we see Thumbelina's mother is still very, very sad, and she is singing the reprise of Soon for, like, hopefully I will see you again soon, with, like, just missing Thumbelina so much. She's made her a new dress. She's just very sad. All the farm animals are sad. Hero is sad, because they all miss Thumbelina and everything. And so we get that moment going on. And then we cut to where Thumbelina has been taken in by Mrs. Field Mouse, who's, granted her shelter underground, so at least they're warm. And Mrs. Field Mouse actually, or Miss Field Mouse, not Mrs., Miss Field Mouse actually ends up kind of telling Thumbelina about Cornelius's supposed fate of him being found stone cold dead in the snow, which is far too blunt of a way to do this when you know that Thumbelina clearly is, like, has feelings for the prince. Even if they weren't in love, if it was just friendship or something, that would still be a horrible thing to say, to do that. But she kind of apologizes, and then she takes Thumbelina to go and meet Mr. Mole, who is Miss Field Mouse's very, very wealthy neighbor. And what ends up happening is, they go and they meet Mr. Mole, and while they're there, he ends up having, while they're there, he ends up taking them. Well, so there's two things that happen. Thumbelina ends up. They ask Thumbelina to sing because they know that she has a beautiful voice, so they ask her to sing, and she ends up singing this little song about the sun. Like, it's winter, and, it's like, I miss the sun and everything. And she's kind of like fantasizing about seeing Cornelius again. And, but now the sun has gone away, even though, it's winter and the sun, even winter has killed the sun type of a thing, because she's just so sad. And now she thinks that Cornelius is dead, so she's just on top of that even sadder. On top of I really want to get home, and now Cornelius is dead, and if he was out looking for me, then it's my fault. Type of thing. So she's worried about that. She's blaming herself there. And then the mole takes them down into his tunnels and everything, and he brings them to what he believes is a dead bird. It's Giacomo. And Thumbelina goes over and she's looking him over, and she realizes that he's not dead. He's just, kind of knocked out at the moment and injured. And while she's over checking out Giacomo, the mole asks Miss Fieldmouse if she would be able to try to convince Thumbelina to marry him. He's like, well, she can sing to me and tell me stories and everything. And it's just like, yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. And Mrs. Fieldmouse, Miss Fieldmouse agrees to this and everything. And we cut away and we cut to where Cornelius is. And there's a lot of stuff that's going on here that kind of happens all in a very short time frame. The beetle tells Grendel that Thumbelina is going to marry the mole, which Grendel is not happy about. And they head off to go to try to stop this. Well, Grendel heads off to go to try to stop this and drags the beetle with him, which is funny. Then we have three of the little children, jitterbugs, show up, and they start trying to thaw Cornelius out of the ice cube that he's in. So they're working on that. So that's just kind of let's get Cornelius thawed. Even though he's been stuck in this cube for who knows how long, and he's a fairy and probably has hypothermia at this point in time, maybe his magic kept him alive. So moving on, we'll work on that. Then we cut back down into Miss Fieldmouse's home, where we have the Marry the Mole sequence, which is a very bad song, but cute. It's a funny song, but it's not a very clever song or anything. And it's Miss Fieldmouse is just trying to coerce/convince Thumbelina to marry the mole and everything. It's you'll have stability and everything, all of that other stuff. Who cares about love? You'll be stable. You'll have riches. He's very wealthy. Maybe he's blind as a bat, but at least his eyes are blue, which is, I'll admit, a funny line. And they're going through the whole musical sequence and everything. And Thumbelina, she's kind of it's kind of wearing away at her. She's very sad because she hasn't found her way home yet. She's even more upset now because and heartbroken because she believes that Cornelius is dead because of her. And, she's like, maybe I should just marry the mole. And she ends up making her way down back into the mole's tunnels, where she finds Giacomo again. And, she starts trying to warm him up, and he wakes up. And she tells him that she's just going to marry the mole. She's decided she's just going to marry the mole and get it over with and everything. And Giacomo is, of course, very much on the line of, no. I'm not even going to try to do a French accent for Giacomo because I can't. No, you're not going to marry the mole. I'm going to go find Cornelius. I'm going to find the Veil of the Fairies. I got to go and get him and everything like that before this stupid wedding. He doesn't call it a stupid wedding, but before this wedding happens and everything. So don't marry the mole. Don't do that. I'm going to go find Cornelius. And he heads off to go to try to find Cornelius again. And Thumbelina is just very frustrated at this point in time because she's just and he keeps singing, the nothing is impossible and everything else like that, the Follow Your Heart song and everything. And she just keeps getting very frustrated with that because, like that's like stay hopeful even when you're sad is kind of like what that's going with. And then we cut to, I guess, the next day or like a couple of days later or whatever for the wedding for Thumbelina and the mole. Time frame is not specified. And they start, Thumbelina is there in not the best wedding dress, I will admit. And she is starting to walk down the aisle, but she still has Cornelius's ring, and she keeps hearing, reprises of, let me be your wings and everything else like that going on, and she keeps feeling like she keeps seeing Cornelius, as she's walking down the aisle in the stained glass and the fire and, the fire from the candle and her ring. She keeps like kind of hallucinating him to a degree, or seeing illusions of him, mirages of him, whatever. And we have like this, I guess he's a rat priest or something like that, maybe as a reference to Secret of Nim, I don't know. And he's the one that's gonna like preside over the ceremony between the mole and Thumbelina. And they ask Thumbelina, it's like, do you marry this mole? And she's like, no, I don't want to marry the mole. And then she starts running out, and that's when Grendel shows up and is trying to catch Thumbelina, but she runs past him. She's like, no, I'm not going to marry anyone. I just want to go home. And she's like running past Grendel, and she has to run past the beetle. And of course, this is when Cornelius shows up with the 3 little kids that help thaw him out. 3 little insect kids that thawed him out. And they show up at the wedding, and he starts fighting Grendel, and they both, unfortunately, the fight climaxes with like them falling down into like a little chasm in there. While that fight is going on, Thumbelina is currently running her way through the mole's tunnels, trying to make her way to where she can hopefully get out with the mole and the priest and Miss Fieldmouse all chasing after her, along with a bunch of the other wedding guests are all chasing after her. Denizens of the underworld, of the underground, going after her, trying to stop her. And she, climbs up this pile of, the mole's treasure, and then like causes it to like fall down toward the wedding guest, which is funny, as she manages to climb out toward the sun, and she makes her way out into the sun, where she is just so happy that like the sun is back. I know how that feels. Even here in Nebraska, at the time that I'm recording this, we have snow on the ground. I don't know when this video will go up, but as of the time that I am recording this, we have like snow on the ground, and it's like our first major snowfall of the year. So I understand how it's like sometimes it's like as it's snowing you just think, oh, the sun will never come back. And then we had like a lot of sun out yesterday, which is very nice. Hopefully we'll get some more later. I don't know. But for all I know, this video may not go up until like spring or something, given the other stuff that I still have to put up before this one. But so this is being recorded several months in advance, but that's okay. I really hope information in this is not going to change between now and then. But we'll see. I hope not. Knock on wood. Knock on wood. And what ends up happening is Thumbelina makes her way outside, and then Giacomo shows up, and he picks her up, and he starts flying her off, trying to take her to the Vale of the Fairies. And because he's finally figured out where it is. And he gets there, and he like drops her off, and she's like, this is just like a pile of weeds, because it's all like twigs and stuff and frozen over, and like it does not look like it should be the Vale of the Fairies. And he's like, sing, sing. He keeps imploring her to sing, and she starts singing "You Will Be My Wings" again. And that's just going off. She's trying to sing, and like she keeps pausing, and she's like, this isn't working. And he's like, keep singing. And as she keeps singing, and like we see the flowers start to bloom, breaking through like the ice around them and everything, as spring is coming, and like as she's singing, and it's blooming, and we see stuff. And then as she hits a certain point in the song, that's when Cornelius shows up, and he starts singing as well. And she's like, it's you, you're alive. And she runs over to him, and she hugs him, and they kiss, and he like lifts her up, and like her wings come out of her back, emerge from her back, and her dress that got all ripped up is all like healed now, is like fixed now, and everything. And and they kiss again and everything, and he asks her to marry him, and she's like, yes, of course I'll marry you. And then we cut ahead to the the wedding of the fairy prince and Thumbelina, Thumbelina and Cornelius. And then we get to the wedding, and it's like being held on their mother's farm on like a little stream area thing where like of course the mom and all the farm animals are in attendance, which is just adorable, and like Hero and everything are there. We don't see any of her, like we don't see like the mole or Miss Fieldmouse or anything like that. It's just mostly all of the fairies, and a bunch of the jitterbugs I think are there, and then the her mother and the farm animals and stuff are there. And we get this beautiful little wedding with like them walking down the aisle or gliding slash flying down the aisle. I love her wedding dress, by the way. That's just a beautiful wedding dress that they designed for her. And they hop on the back of the bumblebee as they're leaving, and they fly off, and they kiss with the moon behind them and everything. And it's they lived happily ever after, and the storybook closes. And then we get the credits, and as the credits roll, we see that in like the margins around the paper where we're seeing the credits, we see that the Beatles' wings regrew, and he resumes his career as a pop star, I guess. We see that Grandel survived the fall, has a broken leg, and is now marrying a female toad, much to his mother's delight, which is funny. And then we see that Mr. Mole and Miss Fieldmouse get married. It's like, that seemed like the logical explanation in the first place, and the logical solution to this problem in the first place was just marry the mole yourself. So we see all that stuff. To be honest, I don't really care about those little ones in the end. I'm okay, sure, fine. They're good, but I don't necessarily care that much. But we get like Follow Your Heart is I think the ending theme of it. I don't think Barry Manilow actually sings any of the songs in this. He was just part of the composer for the songs and the writer and stuff. Which is nice. I enjoy the music in this movie very much, although some of them are ones that not a lot of people like. I really like Let Me Be Your Wings. That one's fun. On the Road, the Toad song is kind of fun as well. But I just like Let Me Be Your Wings. I just think that's such a beautiful song. And then we get into the credits for the cast list. So we have Jodie Benson as Thumbelina. This came out a couple of years after she voiced Ariel for The Little Mermaid. And she does a great job as Thumbelina. I enjoy her as Thumbelina. And then we have Gary Emhoff as Prince Cornelius. We have Joe Lynch as Grandel the Toad. We have Gino Conforti, I apologize if I mispronounce that, as Giacomo, as the Swallow. We have Gilbert Gottfried, may he rest in peace, as Berkeley Beetle, who is of course Iago in the Aladdin franchise. Another Disney alumni. We have Carol Channing as Miss Fieldmouse. She has just been in so much stuff that I don't even know where to start with Carol Channing. Just look her up. She's awesome. And we have John Hurt as Mr. Mole. Harry Potter fans will recognize John Hurt as Mr. Ollivander. Doctor Who fans will recognize him as the War Doctor. And people who like Merlin will recognize him as the dragon that Merlin gets advice from. He's also just been in so many other amazing movies and everything else like that. Movies, shows, and he has also passed away, unfortunately. So all of it, is John Hurt as Mr. Mole. We have Charo, who is just a personality in and of herself, as Mrs. Toad. So just go look her up. She's interesting. We have Kenneth Mars as King Colbert, as Cornelius's father, as the Fairy King. And actually, I mentioned him when I did the We're Back, a Dinosaur Story review, which I had not realized at the time is the same guy who plays Professor Screw Eyes in that. He is also King Triton in The Little Mermaid, which I had known that, I kind of knew a little bit of that, but I hadn't made the connection there. So there's that. And then to top it all off, we have June Foray as Queen Tabitha, as Cornelius's mother, the Queen of the Fairies. You might recognize her from roles as Rocky, the Flying Squirrel from Rocky and Bullwinkle, Cindy Lou Who from How the Grinch Stole Christmas, Nanny from Looney Tunes, and insert list longer than I am tall of so many other characters that she has voiced over the years. I believe she has also passed away, unfortunately, but she was awesome. June Foray is amazing. Just look her up. She has an amazing list of credits to her name. Those are just some of the ones. that I can list there with Rocky and Cindy Lou and Granny and stuff. So just go look her up. She's amazing. So that's what we have for this. I thank you for watching. If you haven't watched Thumbelina in a while, go watch it. I personally love the movie. It doesn't have a high score on Rotten Tomatoes, but I don't care. I still love the movie. I think it's great. And if you enjoy it, that's up to I'm glad about that. Let's put that way. So you have a good day, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.